Gathering online again since we're going through this troubled times, but yet still together online and sharing the good moments, the virtual hugs and kisses and everything else that we would like to do personally. But fortunately, we still have our online sessions to follow through, to get together, to think, to share a good moment in our lives. As I'd like to share with everyone, this is a moment where we are given the opportunity to bring the Spiritist Center environment to our homes. So it's important that we try to do everything that we can to minimize any disturbance, anything that will take your attention from the session. I know it's nice to be home and to have everything that we'd like to be with, even our loved ones, but try to for the next hour to really pay attention, because moments like this is truly imperative for us to kind of create this environment in our homes. If anything that we can get from this crisis is this: we are being called for to change the environment of our homes, and this is the best way possible, because we're bringing a new idea, a new behavior to our homes that in the past we used to dislocate to our Spiritist Center, and here we are making our homes our Spiritist centers. Tonight we have another friend with us, Daniel Assisi. He's speaking about Spiritism and the new thinking for a new era. So we would like to take a moment before we pass the word to him to read a passage of the book Happy Life. And then we will pray together, and we will have about 45 minutes, maybe even less, depending on what Daniel will actually share with us. And then we'll open up for questions and comments that you can actually share with us. For those of you who are able to send us a message through WhatsApp, please do so. I'll try to follow as much as I can. And those that can actually are following us through YouTube, please do so. And I'll keep checking as well and taking note so we can share with them. At this moment, then, I will share the message from Joanna de Angelis, and it says, when a man decides to modify his moral conduct for the better, he seems to face a general conspiracy against his desire for improvement. Everything changes and is out of control. The least little things become complicated, and the rhythm of events changes for the worse for some time. This state of affairs leads the person who would improve himself to retreat and give up. Every transference modifies what's usual. In the area of moral actions, the reactions is the greater because one is penetrating to the root of evil to cut it out. This leads to the growth of new balanced customs. Do not abandon your goals of morality and inner growth because of the first difficulties you encounter. So let us take this moment to thank our dear Creator for this amazing opportunity to be together. Wishing that everyone feel the calmness, the encouragement of this moment, of this hour that we'll be sharing here, with the teachings and the presence of our dear friend Daniel Assisi. We ask, dear Lord, that you bless our homes, our hearts, as we go through these new moments of our lives. The callings to change inside and out, and to accept what we cannot change, and to continue in our endeavors, this beautiful reincarnation, along with our mentors, courageously in spreading a good word, cooperation, and sustaining the work of our dear Master Christ. May tonight this afternoon and tonight be a point of light for all of us. May your light be with our speaker tonight and all of us. And why not ask that the message can be spread through our actions with our family members, our friends, our co-workers, and those who may need the comfort that we are receiving right now. This way, we ask for your guidance and permission to start this talk tonight. So, dear friends, again, as we mentioned, Daniel will be speaking about Spiritism, new thinking for a new era. Our dear Daniel Assisi, many of you already know him, as we like to share and say, he's a friend, he is a husband, a father, and is someone just like us, trying his best to cooperate for this new era, for this new beginning of our lives, the end of an era and the beginning of our lives. And he works incessantly to spread Spiritism. And he speaks on spirituality and Spiritism in the US and internationally. Known for a mix of irreverence and deep thinking, he shares a message of hope and love through rational faith that both inspires and educates audiences about our spiritual nature. Daniel is a founding member of the Spiritist Institute and a board member of the California Spiritist Association. Also hosting the Spiritist Conversation podcast, Dr. Assisi holds a doctorate degree in education and a master's in public administration with a graduate certificate in public policy from the University of Southern California. And here we are with this amazing friend, and we will be spending this hour with him. Daniel, please.
Hey everyone, how are you guys doing? Can you hear me okay? All right. So I just want to say hello. Hello, and thank you for having me. I know that we were scheduled to have this conversation in person, but the world has since then changed quite a bit. The world has turned upside down almost, and we have had to reorganize ourselves and try to find a new way of making this happen. So I'm really grateful for all of our friends at the Spiritist Society of Baltimore who were flexible and who were willing to do this virtually. And like we said before in the beginning of the event, it's great that we have this opportunity to have technology bring us together so that we can still have our meeting, even if it's not in person. We can still talk, ask questions, interact, and be grateful that we can do this. Today, it's a very special day for me, symbolically speaking, is the 18th of April. And this particular date, about 163 years ago, the Spirits book, the first book of Spiritism, was officially published in a small bookstore in the Palais Royal in Paris. And it's a remarkable date because for me, it marks the beginning of Spiritism in general. And Spiritism is a fascinating body of knowledge. It's an incredible thing of itself that really has helped many of us to look at the world from a completely different perspective. And that's what's so fascinating about Spiritism, is because it has really brought a new thinking for this new era that only now we are beginning to really understand and grapple with. So I want to take a couple of minutes today to chat with you and give you some perspectives on how I like to think about Spiritism and the way that it elicits a new way of thinking about life in general, every facet of life, and how that is revolutionary for our times, and how it's also very practical for our times, especially in these times of COVID. And if you are so inclined, I would love to engage with you in some back and forth some dynamic exchanges, some conversations, because I think that that's one of the beauties of Spiritism. It lets us really grapple with lots of different things and look at life, through different lenses that really help us gain a little bit more color and depth to what we see around us today. So if you are watching us live, please don't be shy. Say hello in the comments. Put your comments in there. Let us know what's going on, and we would love to kind of engage as we go. I want to say hi to Alba. I want to say hi to Chris. Thank you guys so much for being here on your Saturday. I know that you could have been doing something different, and it's really exciting to have a chance to talk to you guys, because I say this every time, every place I go. It is truly a pleasure to be able to talk to folks who are trying to understand Spiritism, because to try to understand Spiritism is to try to understand oneself. And it's really reassuring for me to be able to talk and engage with people who are trying to do exactly that which I am trying to do here in California, which is to be a little bit better every day than I was before. So thank you. It's really rewarding to me to have a chance to interact with you, because when I'm feeling down sometimes, I think about you guys over there doing the same work, and it inspires me. So I'm grateful to have this chance to talk with you. I want to say hi to our friend Kirsten as well. And everybody who's watching. We're really thrilled, and we hope that this is just the beginning of a conversation, really, that we have a chance to kind of continue to go. But let's just kind of tackle the bull by its horns, if we may, and let's change things a little bit. I mean, we are in the middle of this pandemic, this crisis that has shook up the way we go about our lives. All of our lives have somehow been impacted by this different thing that's going on. And you might have noticed a couple of weeks in, we were very scared about what was happening. There was a lot of doubt, a lot of anxiety, a lot of frustration, a lot of fear, and all kinds of unanswered questions that lay around, because to be honest with you, it just felt like the world was breaking down and nobody had answers for that. Nobody could really tell us what was going on. And a lot of it, I think, is because we have kept this thinking system, we have kept this way of thinking that is somewhat antiquated for understanding spiritual matters and important ethical dilemmas in general. And it's time to kind of renew them and think of them afresh. And that's why I think it's so timely that we can also celebrate the 18th of April while we're going through this, because I do think that the tools that Spiritism has given us and that have helped us understand the world can be very practical and very relevant for the challenges that we're facing today. So I'm going to ask for your indulgence. I'm going to do a little bird walk here. I'm going to give us a little bit of perspective, and then I want to come back to how Spiritism is relevant to our modern days. But I think that my main point that I want to start with is we clearly need a new way of thinking about things, because life has basically pumped the brakes on us, has put us on timeout, and has sent us back to our homes to reevaluate our lives and to rethink how we're doing. And we are struggling making sense of it all, because we haven't had great tools with which to understand the world at large from a spiritual or higher perspective. Because frankly, we have been told in the past that things happen for a reason, and that was that, and we could not really go further than that. But now we can. So I want to do this bird walk, if that's okay with you. We're going to go down in a little bit of a brief history and little perspective, and then we're going to look at how Spiritism came about. And lastly, we are going to look at how Spiritism is reflective and useful for the times that we have now. It could perhaps be one of the best tools we have to gain a little bit of assurance and understanding of what's going on, why it's going on, and what's going to happen with us. I hope that makes sense. So hang in there with me. All right, so Spiritism, new thinking for a new era. I just want to start by saying, something that I think all of us may at this point in time be familiar with, which is a lot has changed over the times, right? We are definitely in this new era of things. And we have made more progress in the last 150 years than our entire history before. If you think about it, we have placed a man on the moon and brought him back. We were able to circumnavigate the Earth on a boat or a balloon in a couple of days. And nowadays, we have been able to basically cut across the globe, flying in a matter of hours. And we still complain about Wi-Fi during the plane, and the quality of food is incredible. We're sitting in this incredible piece of metal that's heavier than air, flying through the skies, and sometimes we lose perspective of how incredible that is. But we have been able to do lots of incredible feats of engineering and understanding the world around us. We have grown comfortable. We have so many comforts in our lives that we have never dreamed of before. We are able to have comfortable homes that are insulated from the weather, that are either heated or air conditioned. We have indoor plumbing, which I always joke saying that's one of the proofs of the existence of God. Imagine life before indoor plumbing. That was not necessarily great. But all these things have brought us a lot of comfort, but they have left us wondering about the purpose of life in general. So in these 150 years, ever since we were able to have Spiritism come on board, we have had the development, the improvement of the telegraph. We have had the explosion of the information with the internet, and it's just been an incredible piece. But the truth is that for the past 500 years or so, humanity has been on this upward trend of sharing and collaborating and growing in information. I think that ever since the beginning of the printing press with Gutenberg in the 1500s, where it was possible for us to mass produce books and make them affordable, because once you mass produce something, you lower the price. And by making books affordable to the middle classes or the higher middle classes, all of a sudden knowledge started to spread. People were able to start to read, and they could get information from different parts of the world. And fast forward, 500 years later, we have everything that we could ever want at the tip of our hands in our little magical boxes, our little phones that perhaps would be once considered witchcraft by folks before us, because you can really do amazing things with these little machines. Yet, we have struggled to be happier. We just have. If you look around the world, people have apparently almost everything that there is to be had, and yet suicide rates have never been higher in our history, and they seem to be increasing. So there seems to be a disconnect about purpose and meaning and the knowledge that we have acquired. All that to say that all that new thinking that we have developed over time, right, which has trended towards being fact-based, where we're continuously adding more knowledge to our understanding, where we are growing that information constantly, where we're collaborating with different people to gain more information, and where we are valuing more and more an open source system where everybody can provide input, where everybody can see what's happening, which has led to us trying to flatten organizations the way we're thinking. We're trying to do away with hierarchy and no longer look at people's contribution just because of their authority. We're trying to move to a meritocracy where people can contribute openly to whatever it is and grow that information. We see that on our startups, on our .coms, on our works. Relationships have changed, and we're trying to have a more egalitarian and more equitable society that is not based in hierarchies. And we also have shifted from a more academic perspective to a very practical piece. I think we can all agree that all of us nowadays really want to find out, like, what should I do? What's it in for me? Give me an answer right now. Right? So the world has clearly changed from what we thought was there before, and nothing really is as it was 150 years ago. In fact, if you went to any profession right now and they still operated as they did 150 years ago, would you trust them? So if you went to your doctor and your doctor only had knowledge and approaches that were practiced 150 years ago, would you go to that doctor? Would you trust that doctor with your health? If you went to your accountant 150 years ago and they were still keeping, score of things on paper, would you really hire that accountant? So all these different fields of knowledge, and whatever field of knowledge you want to dive into, you're going to notice that they have evolved over time. They have been fact-based, they have been progressive, they have collaborated, they have grown a body of knowledge, and to a certain extent they're trending towards being open, and they have evolved. But there's one area of society that hasn't really evolved in the past 150 or perhaps 200 or 400 or 500 years, which is religious thinking. And that has been a challenge because when we need it the most, we have an old system of thinking that is based on hierarchy, on structure, on established facts that cannot be changed. All these values that we had in the past, that served us well in the past, that don't serve us well today, are still evident in our scientific, or in our religious thinking. So that it is a challenge because we have all this information, we have all this different knowledge, but we haven't been able to extract a lot of meaning from it because our ethical and religious thinking processes haven't caught up to these times. So it's no surprise that we struggle quite a bit to make sense of what's happening today because we haven't exercised really these new values of openness and collaboration and open sourceness and flat structures when it comes to spiritual and religious thinking. What we really need is some sort of tool to catch us up to this modern thinking that is prevalent everywhere else in our society. Everywhere else we are using these values of collaboration, of dynamic growth, of sharing, of fact-based analysis, but not in spirituality. But we need something. What if we could have something that would investigate spirituality in general, our ethical senses, through a constant fact-based approach that would collaborate with others, that would make sure that authority was not an important factor when judging the value of information, that instead we should value information by itself, right? So not because of somebody said it, but because of what it is said. That would help us with all the fake news issues out there. We are struggling with make sense of fake news, right? So the good news is, however, that we have such a tool. We have a tool that can kind of go through all these different things. It's just that we haven't realized it as a society. That tool came about, as we said, in 1857 in Paris, France, in the Dantou bookstore in the Palais Royal, where it was published for the first time, the first edition of the Spirits book. And the Spirits book, it's a monumental work, in my opinion, not because it's a book, and not because it is because it contains lots of incredible content and knowledge. The Spirits book, it's amazing because it's the representation of this new thinking process that came about with it, which is this openness to reevaluating things in a whole different level. So with the birth of Spiritism 163 years ago, I feel that we have been given a tool that only now we are beginning to realize how impactful and how powerful it is to be able to understand these modern times that we have, which could not otherwise truly be understandable. So what do I mean by that? So follow here with me. So because Spiritism is a progressive body of knowledge, which means it's always growing, it has overcome a major hurdle. It can adapt itself with times. So we no longer have something stale and stuck and stationary, but we have a way of thinking about things from a religious and spiritual perspective that can advance with the times, that follows science side by side. And that's a game changer, because never in the history of humankind have we had a system of religious thinking or ethical thinking that progressed and advanced with the times and was dedicated to that progress. So if we want a tool to understand our modern challenges, chances are Spiritism will be very well equipped to be that tool. So what does that mean? Well, we can look at the very definition of Spiritism itself as Allan Kardec offered it to us a while back. And what is that definition? Well, he said that Spiritism is a science which deals with the nature, origin, and destiny of spirits, as well as their relationship to the corporeal world. So let's break it down. right? So Spiritism is really a way of thinking, a science, which deals with the nature of spirits, the origin of spirits, and the destiny of spirits. What does that mean? What are spirits? Who are we truly? Are we physical? Are we more than physical? Where do we come from? And what's going to happen to us? Where are we going? And what is this relationship between the spiritual and the physical world? So Spiritism goes to the core of all these age-old questions that have troubled humanity and that we have struggled to answer because we didn't have tools to maintain this dialogue going. We would get a piece of information through times, we would think that's a wonderful revelation, but then we would refuse to move on. Somebody would get a hold of that and say, this is the way things are, and we don't want input into this. Then somebody else would get a new piece of information and say, we've heard this from spirituality of God, this is how things are, we're not opening to change it, and this is how it is. And so we have these bits of information that have been frozen in time, that have refused to change in general. But with Spiritism, we are proposing a different approach of thinking about all of this. We are proposing a way of constantly evolving that thinking to deal with these key questions. And here's what's really fascinating in my perspective, because once you look at that method and when we are able to use our brain, we see that there's a fantastic shift that goes on here. First of all, Spiritism was born of inquiry. It didn't start by a prophetic revelation. It didn't start by a prophet or a medium or some enlightened being getting a message from heaven. It started from research. It started from the desire to understand what was happening. There were some strange phenomena taking place in Paris in the 1850s and elsewhere in the world too. And somebody decided to investigate that because they didn't seem to make sense to the current understanding of the times. And that man was Professor Revel. He was an established educator. There was these phenomena happening where tables and objects were moving. He knew that they could not move by themselves. After much convincing, he started to study them, and he quickly realized that the objects could not move by themselves. There had to be a different explanation, and that explanation became more apparent when the objects began to act in an intelligent way. When they started to act in an intelligent way of making certain movements based on commands, it was obvious to him, as it should be to us, that chairs and tables and objects cannot move on themselves, so somebody else must be acting on them. So he went down that research and inquiry mode, that rabbit hole, and through this conversation he learned about the existence of the spirits. The spirits, that is to say, the intelligences of those who have lived before us and have shed their physical body, lived on, continued. And they were trying to get our attention to point us to the fact that there is a scientific way of doing about this. So it's a fascinating piece because where every other method of understanding about the spiritual world begins with a message that is a special message that is given to somebody that's considered to be special, Spiritism was the opposite. It started by investigating. There was no agenda. There was no desire to start a new thing. It was just investigation of what was going on. The second thing that I think is really interesting, it's different about Spiritism altogether from everything else that we have used so far to make sense of spirituality and religiosity, is the fact that it continues to amass information. So because it has a scientific approach and because its DNA is of questions and answers, of inquiry, Spiritism has started, but it will never stop. There is no end to Spiritism. Contrary to other thinking processes which says, here's what we believe in, here's what we don't believe in, that's it, we're set for life. Spiritism says, we believe in constantly evolving our knowledge. And we are going to continue to amass information as we discover more things to the world, and we are going to add to this body of knowledge and make it grow and make it dynamic. So yes, Spiritism started with Allan Kardec, but it has not ended or stopped with Kardec. It has continued to evolve over times, and we now have hundreds, if not thousands, of different books and contributions and authors who have built on the amazing work that was first started by Kardec, for which we are very grateful, but have continued to live on and will continue to live on even after we do, because it has to grow and evolve as well. So it's a fascinating piece when it comes to that. The other thing that's really interesting about spirituality and Spiritism in specific is that it was also a collaborative effort. What do I mean by that? It wasn't just Kardec knocking on doors and figuring things out. He elicited the help of many different people in different places to collaborate with him in the building of this new way of looking at life. He would reach out to different people, and in doing so, he would ask them certain questions that they were then supposed to pose to the phenomena, to this manifesting spirits by themselves, so that he could get different perspectives from different sources that did not know each other. So it was sort of like an interesting and elaborate scientific experiment. You get one question, you ask it to 5 different people who don't know themselves, don't know each other. They gather that information, they give it back to you, and you compare all those results. And because you've done that, you have strengthened your results, because you know that if something is true, it's going to happen consistently throughout different places. So it's a fascinating approach that has never been tried in the field of spiritual thinking. It just hasn't. And another interesting piece here, too, is that he made this always free and open to all. He never claimed ownership for it. From the beginning, he understood that it was not to be his work. So much so, the spirits even asked him to change his name for the publishing of these works. He was not even allowed to use his real name, which was already established and would have made Spiritism even spread faster, I think, because that was not his work. The choice of the name Allan Kardec is a stamp of open sourceness to the piece. It's saying, this is not the work of a human incarnate being. This is the work of a collective mind hive that is sharing all this information for the benefit of humankind. And it's not owned by anybody, so it will not be attributed to a living being. And the first book was even called the Spirit's Book. It was even called Kardec's book or Rivel's book. It was called the Spirit's Book exactly for that reason, saying this has to be a collaborative and ongoing process. This is how it is going to make sense for all of us. So that's a fascinating piece of it. And one more piece here, interesting as well, that I would want to share with you is that because it has to do with all of these things and is very practical in nature, is very inquiry-based, it's very progressive, it's very collaborative, it's very practical to our lives. It's no longer about memorizing things that somebody has told us. It is about learning how to process information, how to make sense of the world, and in doing so, how to have happier and more fulfilling lives. This is one fundamental piece of Spiritism which I think goes unnoticed, and it's really hard for us because Spiritism doesn't have a hierarchy. There are no priests, there are not owners, there are not bosses in Spiritism, and we have to kind of figure things out by ourselves. We have to learn how to learn. We have to learn how to obtain information and judge it critically in our minds to make sense of it. If you look at the way Spiritism came about, after the Spirit's Book, which was the fundamental basis for everything, which, by the way, was already brought forth in question and answers format, as if to suggest that we need to vet those answers by ourselves, that we should go get the information in its original source and make our own decisions. After the Spirit's Book, what we have as book number 2 in Spiritism is the Medium's Book, which is an explanation of the phenomena of mediumship, the best treatise ever written, in my opinion, about spiritual communication, the first and best ever, because Kardec and the good spirits were keen to teach us how to get the information ourselves. Had we stopped at the Spirit's Book, we would have a wonderful amount of new information, but we would not know how to get new information for ourselves later on. So the spirits were keen to give us a way of learning how to process and obtain information from the spiritual realm so that Spiritism would not face the challenges that other thinking processes had experienced in the past, which was to be crystallized, to get a new piece of information and get stuck in it and not move forward. But kind of like a game of telephone, when we don't know what's going on and we want some clarification about some topic, with mediumship, with resorting to the enlightened spirits and mentors and guides that we all know we have, we can get clarification on those issues. We can get new knowledge and move us past that whole piece. So it's a fascinating thing because the spirits from the beginning were keen on not giving us fish, but teaching us how to fish so that we could get that information ourselves. And that empowering of the individual is fundamentally different from anything that we tend to see in the realm of spiritual or religious thinking, where a couple of people, because of hierarchy, things go a little bit astray, our human ego gets in the way, and we tend to want to control things. We tend to want to have people do things our way because we think that they're better, because, hey, they're our way. Of course my way is better than your way. Like, we all think that in our minds, consciously, unconsciously sometimes, because we haven't worked on that collaborative piece yet. But Spiritism was structured in such a way as to not let us do that. So that is why there is no clergy, there is no central structure in Spiritism, because it asks us, all of us, to contribute to it, to collaborate with it. At the same time, it makes it really confusing because we sometimes want a boss. We want somebody to tell us what's what. We want somebody to show us what's true and what's not, because we are used to thinking that way. We are used to this old ways of thinking where we want somebody to do the work for us, as opposed to helping us do the work for ourselves. But we know that in learning, we have to do the work for ourselves if it is to stick. So we have to grapple with the challenges of it. And so Spiritism is very practical because of that, because it teaches us how to make sense of the world and information around us, whether it's spiritual information that we obtain from our mediums and spirituality in general, or the day-to-day work, right? So part of our learning in Spiritism is not only the learning of content, but learning of this method of how to judge the implicit value of information that we get, because a lot of the information we get, we don't know exactly who it comes from because it comes from mediumship and we cannot see who is giving us the information. So we have been learning more and more as we learn Spiritism how to judge the value of that information regardless of who gives it to us. So what I'm saying in a roundabout way is that Spiritism is one of the best fake news killer out there, because we've been trying to kill fake news, spiritually or not, since 1857. And if you want to have a wonderful guide on how to judge a message by itself, we can go to the Medium's book. I think it's chapter 26 or 27, and Kardec, some of the 20s in there. Don't quote me on it. Go check it out for yourself. Kardec give us some pointers on how to make sense of the information that we are receiving when we don't know the authorship, and how to decide whether we should give it credence or not. So it's a fascinating thing in general to understand how this was revolutionary for the 1857s. It's so revolutionary that we don't even understand it nowadays. We're just beginning to make sense of it all nowadays. And that's why I think Spiritism really is a thinking for a new era, because it has prepared us to the challenge that we face today, right? It was a gift that was sent to us ahead of its time, but not before its time. So had Spiritism come a little bit before the 1850s, I don't think we as a society would have valued it, because we would not have had the scientific understanding to make it happen. So it came at the right time, but it came ahead of its time because I think only now are we really making sense of it and beginning to unpack all the beauty and the rich that's in it, right? So while we have this COVID situation going on and we're all struggling to find out what's happening and what's not happening, Spiritism can give us very practical answers to this challenge. We know that we are going through a phase of change in the world. We know that we need to catch up on how we apply all the knowledge that we have developed over time. And we know that we need to focus a little bit more on the moral implications of our actions. So this moment is an incredible moment for us to kind of rethink the way our society is going and how we can change it so that it addresses some of the issues that we have been longing for, but we have been unable to really tackle. So one interesting thing, for instance, here, I feel, is that this pandemic has kind of forced us to apply the golden rule, to be kind to each other, because in taking care of others, we benefit ourselves. So we are now being forced to say, hey, I want to make sure that I don't contaminate you, so I'm going to sacrifice a little bit of my freedom and stay home, because in not contaminating you, it would also help me in general. So and realizing that we have to think about doing things differently. So all this kind of knowledge also brings to us a certain assurance that we are going to be okay, because we also understand that spirituality is with us and that we don't die. I mean, we lose our physical bodies, but we don't cease to be. So a lot of the fear that comes from this contamination with COVID goes down a little bit, because we understand that life goes on. And in doing so, and having this ability to understand the process, takes away some of that anxiety and some of that fear, and lets us go back to the big and important things, which are the things that kind of keep us on track for evolution in general, for thinking about things differently. A lot of folks, I don't know about you, but a lot of people I know are really struggling with this quarantine piece of staying home and not having to do, not being able to do things the way they did before. While some other people are really finding the joy in things that they had forgotten, right? They are reading books, they are spending more time with their kids, they are doing these projects that they were interested in doing a while back and never got time to. People are realizing that, you know what, maybe after this crisis, I am not going to work as hard as I did before, because what was the point? Right? It was taking a lot of time away from what I wanted to do. So a lot of this reflection is, I think, a peppering of sorts in the seasoning of our day-to-day lives, so that we can kind of rethink. But Spiritism allows us to have this frame of mind that leads us to that. And I think just to kind of finish it up before we start conversation here is Spiritism is very practical. It's to be applied every day. So it's not really just an exercise of academic thinking. So it has to be constant and coherent with itself. So one of the questions that I ask myself as I learn about these different aspects of Spiritism, this scientific aspect, this philosophical aspect, and this ethical religious aspect, and I wonder, shouldn't we be doing the same thing? Shouldn't we also be more like Spiritism? Should we maybe not ask ourselves if we ourselves are acting in a fact-based way? Are we looking at the facts before we start sharing things with people? So one silly example is, are we sharing fact-based information about this coronavirus issue, or are we just forwarding stuff that people send to us in social media? Are we really making sure that this is rational stuff? Are we living our life that way? Are we moving on hunches and on impressions, on perceptions, or are we really trying to get to facts and information? That's question number one. Another question that I would ask ourselves is, again, based on the other things that we're talking about, is, are we progressive too? Are we also advancing in our knowledge, or are we settled in a ways? Remember how we said that Spiritism keeps on growing, keeps amassing new information? So if that is the case, are we also continuing to grow, or are we just sitting back and just doing the same things over and over again? Are we reading different books? Are we trying to learn new things? Are we trying to do new things? Are we going to different places in our lives to try to continue to gather new information so that we grow too? Because we tend to get comfortable with time, and it's really hard to change because we settle in our ways, and when we settle in our ways, we kind of like freeze, and that never works out well, right? And the other question that also comes to my mind is, how are we collaborating with the world? We talked about Spiritism being very collaborative in nature, where we had to gather all this information and work with different people to make sense of the world. Are we doing the same with our lives? Are we talking to different people? Are we working with different people? Are we contributing and benefiting from being open to their contribution to our lives? Are we engaging with the world and adding value to the world, or are we just hoping that the world would give us things? Or do we feel that the world owes us something? Because the world doesn't owe us anything. In fact, we owe the world quite a bit for the chance of being here. right? And one final question that I thought was really interesting too is, are we open? Are we open to new things and to all? We talked about openness and open sourceness, right, with Spiritism in general. Are we open as well? Are we creating hierarchies, and do we want people to treat us like authority? Or are we okay? We understanding this new order of life where we are not going to judge people by the worth of their social status or their wealth or their whatever it is that you want to think of a status symbol, but instead we are going to treat everybody the same because we understand that we're all creatures of God and that we should listen to the merit of the ideas and not where they're coming from. Where they're coming from might help us dictate and understand the merit, but are we listening to the ideas and to the things that we hear and judging them by their sole worth in themselves, or are we still creating these hierarchies in our mind where some people are better than others or we want to be better than others? Are we opening ourselves up too? Because if we want to really think in a new way, if we really want to be participants in this new era, then the tool that was given to us 163 years ago, which I still think is the best tool that I have ever encountered to process life in general, that tool tells us that we need to have this fact-based approach, that we need to have this dynamic and progressive approach to things, that we need to have this collaborative approach to gathering information, and that we need to be open to all. That this kind of knowledge that progresses mankind, it's not the ownership of some, but it belongs to us all. And so what kind of role are we playing in that? What kind of thinking and behaviors are we emulating? Are we aligned with our behaviors? Are we acting in that specific way? Are we really behaving ourselves as Spiritism teaches us to behave? Because it's time for us to make this shift from thinking that Spiritism is just wonderful knowledge to understanding that Spiritism is a way of thinking and acquiring knowledge constantly that never stops, that works with others, that's open to all, that is engaging and democratic, that demystifies anything it touches because it hopes to understand it. And it hopes to make this connection between the mind and the heart. The longest and most difficult trip we will ever take is connecting the 20 or so inches between our mind and our hearts. It's making sure that they're aligned. And Spiritism is, to me, the best tool to help us go in that direction. How we use it is a different perspective, but once we begin to understand that we can't look at the world with different eyes through a more scientific mind approach, a more philosophical understanding, and a more ethical application, the world begins to change, and the things around begin to change as well. And I think that's fascinating because the world becomes a different world, even though it's the same world. So we can be in the middle of this pandemic and not be as freaked out about it as other people are because we know that things are going to be okay. Because we know that this is a moment of transformation, that everything that comes our way has a purpose for being, and we can take the meaning out of this and make this world a better place. And that we are not going to kind of go away from where we are, right? And just stop being. We're going to continue to evolve. And Alba has a question here for us as well. So how does Spiritism define this new era? In other words, what's ahead of us morally speaking? What's in store in our future as a humanity? And I think that's a great question that Spiritism has tons of answers for. And hi, Alba. I think that Spiritism is uniquely prepared to tell us that. We have talked about, there is this jargon in Spiritism that sometimes you might hear called Planetary Transition. And all that to say is that we have reached a phase of our collective evolutionary process in which we need to do a little bit of leap and catch up because we haven't done a great job at doing that. But the truth is, the world is always changing and has always been changing and will always change, right? Nothing in nature stops changing. Everything is constantly evolving. It just so happened that we're now in this phase where because we have evolved so much in one way, we have acquired all this knowledge that we talked about, but we haven't learned yet how to apply it in a way that it it's equitable and fair to everybody. So we have to be shaken up sometimes by surprises to break this congealed thinking processes that we have. We need to be shooken up by life, right? A little bit of a slap on our faces to kind of go back and say, hold on a second. We need to kind of rethink the ways we're doing. So this period that we are in, this new era that's coming, is an era where we are going to make this shift from the focus on the physical and comfortable to the focus on the spirit and what lasts. And I think that you are beginning to sense that even before this COVID thing, lots of different people have been struggling to make sense of life. And a lot of people have this undercurrent. I don't know if you have been hearing this, but for the past 5-10 years, I've had a lot of people come to me and say, you know what? I'm not exactly happy. I don't know what it is, but I want to do something different, and I don't know what that is. And so there has been a lot of thinking going on, and people saying, what should I be doing with my life? What is my purpose for life? And I'm not quite there yet, right? So it's a fascinating thing to see that this is the telltale signs that this bubbling of this new era has been happening already within us, that we have been slowly being led to this idea that perhaps there's more than meets the eye, that we learned 163 years ago that was the case, and that we should really pay attention to the things of the spirit, the things that last, right? One of the wonderful things that Spiritism does for us is it teaches us to reevaluate everything with new eyes. That includes the teachings of the Christ. And we understand that a lot of that can be seen anew with this understanding of reincarnation and this survivability of the soul being proved by all these different methods. So I'm excited about this new era because it's an era in which we are going to have to change our habits, and in doing so, we're going to be kinder to each other. We are going to be nicer to each other, and in doing so, we are going to benefit from it. We're going to have a better place. Imagine this. Imagine the people that you really care about, that you really trust, that you really love, right? Think of them. Now imagine if everybody else in society was like them, and then you had the same feelings towards them. Wouldn't that be incredible? Wouldn't it be amazing to live in a world where everybody is kind to each other and really is not trying to game each other or take advantage of each other, but just really help each other? That'll be heaven on earth. That's what's coming. We might not see it in our lifetimes because it takes time to change our habits, but the good news is that we have many lifetimes. So we will come back and start to work on this more and more until there's a tipping point and the whole of the planet behaves that way. So whatever effort we do today, we learn that we will be reaped by ourselves in future incarnations. So there is a lot of reason to rejoice here, because these difficult moments, when we zoom out from a spiritual perspective and see it from like a little bit afar, are really a moment of growth. They're not a moment of pain. They're a moment of learning. Of course, when you're in the middle of it, it hurts, right? And nobody likes pain. Let's be honest, right? But when we are able to shift our mindset from thinking about the immediate here and now, which is the voice of the physical body, and think with the mind of the spirit, we say, wow, this is painful. Pain is making me change the way I think. If we didn't have this pain, things would be worse. Like, for instance, we all put our hands sometimes on hot things and burn our hands, right? There's a natural physical response in your nervous system that recognizes that you've touched your hand in a hot pan or what have you, in a hot stove, and that feeling makes you wince and take your hand away before your hand gets so damaged by the heat that you lose your hand or you cannot use it anymore, right? Had we not have that instinct, that feedback system to know that that hurts, if pain wasn't there, we might have lost our hands altogether because we didn't notice, right? So pain is a waking up system to tell us that something needs to change. And when we understand that, we are no longer fixed on the pain, but we fix on what are the lessons that we need to take. So focusing on the spiritual and understanding that we have this journey spiritually to make in many lifetimes and incarnations helps us think of the challenges of this life in a more minute way, in a way that we know it's going to be bearable and that it will serve a higher purpose. So I'm really excited about this phase in a way because it's shifting the way we think about things, right?
Daniel, thank you so much for taking the time to answer the question that Alvin proposed, and it's very enlightening. All this information, you touched on several amazing things that I myself would like to ask and comment on. But I would like to just ask the questions. So all the other ones. 1 second here. I hear myself.
Yeah, it's my microphone is echoing here. Let's fix that.
The microphone thing. So I'm gonna bring someone here.
Is it better now? Is it better now?
Yeah, it's better now. Yeah.
I know Kirsten would like to go ahead and ask a question. Let me go ahead and since she's going to have the opportunity to be with us too, say a hello from Yasko Arakawa, and she says, great talk and information. She says, you called attention to many frontiers of science and technology that were set and developed during the last 150 years that impacted our life and style of living. Did the developments in many areas, such as neuropsychology, quantum physics, cosmology, and etc., challenge some point of the Spiritist codification or added some new points or concepts?
So great question. Hi, first of all. I think that that question is a beautiful one, but it's a somewhat simple one to answer because the way I want to approach this is this. We are struggling in science in general to go to the next level of scientific development and efficiency because we have yet failed to understand the existence of the spirit. So when we don't understand the existence of the spirit or accept it just yet, it becomes hard for us to understand the root causes of things. So in medicine, for instance, we can treat the body, but if we don't understand that a lot of the causes of recurring illnesses and psychological traumas don't come from this existence, but come from a different one, it becomes really hard for us to take the next step in developing those fields. But at the same time, the knowledge that these fields are bringing to us is very valuable, and it hasn't really challenged anything that we have learned in Spiritism, right? And that's a fascinating thing because even if it challenges and it proves that something that we think and hold to be correct at this point in time is not jiving with science, then we are going to follow the very suggestion of our codifier or the person who first put Spiritism together, Allan Kardec, and we're going to leave whatever it is that we have accepted and follow the scientific knowledge that we have acquired. And that's the beauty of Spiritism because it's not a battle between science and religion as we have previously thought through our history and through the times. It's a mutual symbiotic relationship, right? It's not about one being right and one being wrong. It's about both of them growing with each other. Science will help spirituality gain more knowledge and understand the world, and we need that, and we love it, and we want it. And religiosity and spirituality are going to help science also further its knowledge and point in the right direction. So yes, we have not yet seen anything that has gone against what we've learned in Spiritism. But if we do, we're going to change Spiritism and we're going to follow with the times.
Very well answered. Thank you. And I believe Kirsten would like to ask a question as well. Then we're going to go ahead and get some of the questions that I know it's already popping up on the screen there. But
Yeah.
Kirsten asked the question.
She's restarting her computer. So let's talk about.
Shame on you, Kirsten. Shame on you.
Let's go to the question from the.
So yes, I have Anika, if I'm pronouncing this correctly, from Finland, and she asked, can coronavirus be seen as a manifestation of our collective karma?
Oh, great question, Anika. So I think that I also want to first talk about karma and understand it from a spiritist perspective, and think that karma is nothing else but the law of cause and consequence, right? So we know that coronavirus is definitely affecting us. So it has had an impact on us, right? And we also learned from Allan Kardec that let me go back. We also learned from nature that every cause has an effect, right? When something happens, it's because something caused it and created it. But Kardec also brought us a really powerful sentence and a way of thinking that I think is brilliant. He says that if we can't find the cause of our current suffering in this lifetime, then it must have come from one before, because nothing would just happen randomly in nature. Everything is cause and consequence. We might not just sometimes see the cause of the current consequences because we haven't lived in long enough to go back and understand that. So if we are suffering anything in our lives that is hard for us right now, and that we can't place it on an action that we have done in this lifetime because it comes from before. So from that perspective, yes, we could say that there's definitely a collective tone to the coronavirus thing. It doesn't mean that you have infected people in the past. That's not what we're talking about at all. I'm saying is this discomfort, this sacrifice that we have had to make because of coronavirus is something that we have to go through because it benefits us to learn from it, because in the past we haven't perhaps not taken the time to learn or whatever it is that we are going through. But of course, it's a collective piece. It's the whole world too. And I think it's an even more beautiful piece too, because I think the coronavirus has showed us that isolating ourselves into countries and nations is not enough to safeguard us from anything. We have seen this movement of like, I don't want to deal with other people, like countries don't want to talk to each other. But here's something that transcends borders, that transcends nations. It's a global problem that's forcing us to kind of talk to each other and collaborate again, right? So it's a lots of different lessons there that could apply to all of us, whether because we need to kind of deal with something that we've done in this lifetime or in others past. But yes, I think there's definitely a collective piece to it, because nobody suffers an injustice that which we do not quote deserve.
Thank you again, Daniel, for this amazing explanation. I have a question here from Paula Smith, and she asks, when trying something new out of our comfort zone, what is the antidote to start up anxiety?
Hi, Paula. I also want to say hi to the other folks there. I see our good friend Susanna there too. Susanna should join me here as well. I'm sure she would have great answers. So Paula has a wonderful question, right? So starting new things, it's always hard because by definition they're new and they are, untried. And so every time that we try something new, it's understandable that we are going to have some anxiety. Funny enough, I was actually thinking and writing about this a couple of weeks ago. There are two things that come to mind that has really helped me deal with anxiety. I kind of alluded a little bit to them. One of them is to zoom out, right? When we are able to zoom out from our immediate physical perspective and say, oh my God, I'm trying this new thing, it's going to be really hard, and say, hold on a second. I'm an immortal spirit that is made, designed to grow and learn with time. Things might be hard, but whatever lesson I learn now will go with me over time. That helps me take some of the anxiety away because I can understand that, this is what I was made to do. I was made to learn. You were made to grow, right? So we were made not to be couch potatoes, spiritual couch potatoes. We were made to be spiritual adventurers, spiritual travelers. We were made to learn new things. We just forget that sometimes because we get settled in our physical ways, right? And the second thing that takes a little bit of the anxiety away is to make sure that we are taking a step that is commensurate with our legs, right? Because sometimes we want to do such a big step that the knowledge, we want to do it so quickly that it seems really confusing and really hard, and then we develop more anxiety because it's so hard and confusing and new. But if we're able to break that down and take small steps, that anxiety may be reduced a little bit, right? And so there's some wonderful learning theories about this. There's a wonderful theory of learning by a guy called Vygotsky that talks about how to do about doing this. So interesting stuff, but break it into small steps and zoom out and remember that you are made to learn new things. We're here for, right? We need to kind of stretch our spiritual muscles, otherwise we're gonna struggle. Hi, Kirsten. I'm glad that you finally got your computer going.
No. I'm so sorry. Technical difficulties.
I'm just messing with you, Kirsten. Thank you. It's a pleasure seeing you.
You too, Dan. You too. Hey, Leo.
Hello. Welcome.
Sorry, my background's not as beautiful as yours, Dan's and Leo's. Mine's just very homey.
We're here for content, not for background.
It's great comments and just great presentation, Dan. I always love your presentations.
Stop it.
The thing that always gets me is that I always think in terms of what does this look like from a, what is the word? How do I apply what you're saying to my everyday life? That's what I always think about. Like whenever I'm listening to a lecture, like what are the practical steps? So for me, I mean, some modern day things which are awesome and great, like because here we have this live stream, but some of the not so great things like social media, I feel like that hinders or kind of can negatively impact our thinking. So how can people reevaluate their relationship with like social media and just technology and how that is affecting their thinking?
Yes. So that's great, Kirsten. And I want to say hi to some of the folks who are joined to. I see Josara there. Hi, Josara. Great to have you here. I also see my dear Elsa from London. Hi, thanks for being here. I know the time zone there is like 11 o'clock at night there. I love what you said, Kirsten, because I think that's what Spiritism is about too, right? It's about real world relevance, real world change. So how do we bring all this to practical terms? Because we can kind of just go in all these different kinds of ideas, but when it comes to like putting the pedal to the metal, we don't know how to bring it back. And I think it's one of the really cool things that Spiritism gives us, and that's what I try to remind myself all the time, is this process and this method. I oftentimes go back to how the Spirit's book was created and how it's organized, right? You might remember that the Spirit's book has 4 different parts. The first one's called Primary Causes. It's about fact finding. What is the basic information, right? Very Spiritist, right? Starts with the facts. The second part's called the Spiritual World, which is, all right, I've got the facts. How do they come together? How do I understand what that means, right? The third part is the moral implications of that, right? So the moral laws, right? Which is, all right, so now that I have the facts, now that I think I've put my story together, what it means, how should I behave? How should I act? Should I act this way? Should I act that way? And the fourth part of the Spirit's book, which is Hopes and Solaces, is doing exactly that. It's saying, all right, if I have these facts, I've put this together, I think of how should I proceed, play it out. If I act this way, then this is what's going to happen. Oh, I don't like that. Or act this way, this is going to happen. Yes, this is good. So I try to go back to the Spiritist method and say, okay, so what are the facts? What are the basic building blocks? Right? How do I put them together? And how do I behave? So I'll give you a silly example, right? So COVID, right? And all of a sudden there was a run on toilet paper. Everybody and mothers was toilet paper and hand sanitizers, right? And I'm thinking, oh my God, I gotta buy toilet paper and hand sanitizers because I'm not gonna have any toilet paper and hand sanitizers. And all of a sudden I'm like, hold on a second. What are the facts here of COVID, right? Is he gonna give me the runs? No. So I don't need toilet paper, right? Do I need hand sanitizer? Yes. Okay, should I buy it? But hold on a second. If I buy all the hand sanitizers, then other people are not going to have hand sanitizers. And it's no point in me having all the hand sanitizers, because if you don't have the hand sanitizers, then you're still infected. You're going to infect me regardless if my hands are clean or not. So let me dial down my fear factor here, right? And then I say, how does that jive with my ethical perspective? Yes, my ethical perspective should guide me towards being less selfish and more thoughtful of the role. So if I buy all this toilet paper and hand sanitizers, I am going to be doing damage to society, right? Because there are going to be a lot of people who are going to need it and not going to want it, which is very emblematic of our society, by the way. Like, we can do that piece like with all different kinds of things. But if I don't buy it, I just buy enough, then I also know that whoever is in need can get it when they want to, right? One example too, that it was powder milk, right? So baby formula, like, right? We have a 1-year-old that's still taking formula. My wife went to a supermarket and there was like 5 or 4 things and she got 3, right? And then the cashier said, well, you could have gotten the other 3. And she's like, no, but what if there's another mom that's coming here, right? And I mean, can you imagine another mom going there and not finding the milk for their kid? That's untenable, right? So it's starting to kind of play that system out that Spiritism helps us with. It's not just great content, but it's a method for judging and analyzing the world, right? Social media, right? So we could treat social media as a mediumistic communication, and we should follow Kardec's advice on what's worth keeping to ourselves or not, right? Funny enough, the folks here in California at Jazz actually want me to do a thing about technology in general. So I've been thinking about this, and I really think that we vilify social media, but I don't think the problem is social media. I think that social media is like a lens that just magnifies our behavior, right? So whatever we're putting in social media is that we already have in ourselves. So if we are like being rude to other people, because that already exists in us. So it's not social media, it's people are just not kind to each other, right? Would you say something on social media that you would not say to somebody in person, to their face, right? A lot of people do, cyber courage, right? Right? But should we? Like, so it's not about the tool itself, it's about behavior in general. So how do we behave, whether it's through technology or in person, is what we should be focusing on. It's not social media. It's like, of course, has tons of information in there, but so people who like, there's people who are sharing tons of information on social media that are not accurate. These are probably the same people that when they hear something from somebody, they just pass it on without thinking about things either, too, right? So they need to stop sharing stuff that they don't know about on social media, and they need to also stop sharing information live that they don't know about, right? You know, there's even like memes of all kinds of things, right? Karen from Facebook, it's not an expert on coronavirus, right? You should not listen to advice from Karen from Facebook. Like, you know, is Karen a doctor? Is Karen an immunologist? Does Karen knows what she's talking about? So, you know, you write Karen off. If there's a Karen listening, sorry, I didn't mean to pick on you. But you know what I'm saying? So I think that we like Spiritism brings us back to the core behavior and things and gives us this actionable thought discerning method that if we adhere to it, if we stick to it, then we have the tools to make sense not of just spiritual information, but everything, whether it's gossip that happens in real time, whether it's bad mouthing that happens in social media, or anything else.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah.
That
Thank
is
you for
awesome.
sharing that. Yeah.
Thank you. Does that clear your question, Kirsten?
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Daniel, quick question here. And well, before I go to questions, I want to actually just share that some of the comments that we have received, and you probably have seen, Fatin actually have messaged on YouTube that she has actually learned or relearned how to appreciate things, you know, with her time, as well as how she uses her other resources like money. So I think that it actually speaks for everybody. That is just an amazing comment there for all of us. But I want to go back to the beginning of your talk when you mentioned about our flat structure of learning process, and I think that that's certainly true. And I would like to, with some of the comments that you just brought to Kirsten right now, to Kirsten's question, what is, being that it's a science, you know, Spiritism is a science, what is the structure that we find with the science? I like to believe it's not flat, but I'd like to hear from you. what is the structure and what brings us, what new way of learning this science brings to us?
Yeah, so we should probably start by saying that science has the understanding of the word science could have changed a little bit with time. And nowadays, when we think of science, we think of test tubes and all kinds of apparatus and kind of things, and that's also science. But the core of science, as I understand it, is this systematic approach to learning and exploring the world, right? So what do scientists do? They create a hypothesis about something, and they go out and design a way of testing that hypothesis, right? Doing experiments that will give them the information for them to make sense of what they thought about and whether that makes sense, whether that's coherent, whether that's true or not, right? So from a scientific perspective, we don't even need to pick up a calculator or a test tube to do these mental thought experiments. We can do that in our lives too. So we can say, all right, I think this is happening. So what kind of experiment will I create? And what theory do I have about this? And how do I check on that theory? Right? So that's what I think is beautiful about science, because it teaches us to constantly progress and challenge our assumptions. Sometimes we work on these assumptions of people or things or whatever it is, and we don't even question ourselves, why do we believe the things that we believe? We have just taken them in somehow, somewhere, for some reason, and we have accepted them. Right? For me, for instance, I'll give you an example. I had that idea with the idea of Jesus and the Christ. From an early age, you talked to me about Christ, and I had been spoon-fed this idea of a Christ, and I didn't want to listen. It took me a while to break down the message that other people had given me of what Jesus was or was supposed to be. And when I started learning and studying and thinking a little bit more critical on my own, I said, oh my goodness, this guy is not actually it's not excluding of others at all, right? It's the most accepting spirit human being that I have ever seen, that was ahead of his time and accepting everybody else. And that's so different from what I hear people who sometimes call themselves Christians say, right? So checking our assumptions, looking for experimentation, hypothesizing about things, getting facts, thinking about it, collaborating with others, and seeing if it's happening in other places. It's a lesson from science that I think we can take into our lives, in a moral perspective and a religious perspective too. We got to go back to the facts, the base, and ask ourselves, how do I know this? And how can I add to what I know?
Awesome. That is a great answer. In this world of, that we're allowing ourselves to be fed with whatever comes towards us and we don't check, it's just... I know it's a very strong word. It's just insane.
Doesn't it sound like it? It really feels like sometimes you're like, oh, what's happening over here, right?
I was having a conversation, and not trying to make this about me, with a family member about all the stimulus, that is going to the economies, right? I mean, economics. The businesses and all, as well as for the people now that they're receiving the checks and everything. And the person was like, well, but I heard that you would have to do this. And the first question was like, okay, where did you hear this? And the person was silent, and the person couldn't answer it.
From Karen from book.
Exactly.
Right? That's where you come from.
Heard it. So, I'm just using this example because, we need to go after. We need to not only check the source, but, okay, is the source relevant enough? Does this person who told me ABC is credible enough to give me that information and for me to accept it and apply into this huge scheme of things that is our own life, right?
Yeah.
So I think that is an amazing topic that you bring, and that is definitely Spiritism makes us question. And Allan Kardec himself, he tells us to not just take for granted, go and analyze.
Yeah.
One other comment I'd like to make here before I go on, Patton just brought a comment here to us, but I remember very clear speaker in Brazil, Spiritist speaker, listening to a talk. She went in so deep into this idea of checking facts that, for us to study history to its core, so we can actually make a connection that, okay, this is how Spiritism is helping us, and it's really leading us to say, okay, we can rescue these things from the past, that it actually happened, And we see books, for example, from Emmanuel or Eloise, and we can make correlation to what has happened at that time that we didn't pay attention, right?
Yep. Yep. Can I jump in there, Leo? Because I think that so I don't know if it's Faten or Faten. So I apologize for mispronouncing your name. Please let me know how to pronounce your name. I really want to get it right. But she has a great point that I think goes to what you're saying, right? She says COVID-19 made people wake up to the reality of death, and most of them start panicking and being scared, right? Spiritism made me think about it on a daily basis, and I'm thankful for the peace it brought me, which is a wonderful thing, right? Because it sounds morbid, but we haven't really thought about death. Like, our society has not really taught us how to prepare for death. We avoid it at all costs, right? Socially speaking, we getting old is a bad thing. We do all kinds of like beauty procedures. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but we do that because we don't want to like seem old. We cheat death to the extent that we can. But at one point, we are going to have to face the only certainty that we have, or maybe one of the two certainties we have, according to Benjamin Franklin, right? One is taxes and the other one's death, and we have to deal with that. So this moment for reflection can be a really scary one. We're not used to it. But if you have the time and you make a time to think about the act of dying, and we understand that Spiritism has shown us that there is no death, there's this transformation, then death becomes not something to be feared, but something that can actually motivate you. And I'll give you an example that's not a Spiritist thing whatsoever, Faten, but like I actually have this coin here, and it's what's called as a memento mori, right? And there's some artwork here in front from an artist in the 17th century, and in the back it has a sentence from Marcus Aurelius' Reflections, says, "You could leave life right now," right? And I use this as a reminder that, you know what, at one point in time I will leave this physical body. But fortunately, I know very well that as a spirit, I will live on, because I have done that before. I have died before, right? Many different lives. I might not remember, but I've gone through the process before. And I have seen and I've talked to people, right, on the other side of the process. So I know that for a fact. But I want to make sure that I use my time efficiently. So I have been working on trying to repurpose my priorities based on the fact that I only have a certain amount of time left in this lifetime. So I'm personally going through a struggle. Like, what do I do with the rest of my life? Do I want to work to the level that I was working before? Do I want to spend more time exploring and talking and thinking about things such as this one? So death for me has transformed from something that's scary to something that will help me make sure that I try not to watch all the Netflix shows out there in the world. That I try to use that time for do something. Not that watching Netflix is bad, mind you, right? But this for me is a physical reminder sometimes, like for me to kind of recenter myself and says, what is important to me? What is it that I should be focusing on, knowing that I only have X number of years left in this planet? So it can seem very morbid, right? This memento mori, this remember that you will die, right? It can sound very morbid, and I don't want to come across this way, but it works for me because it's not morbid for me. It makes me ground myself in the idea of the spiritual and rethink how is it that I should be living my life, because I know that for me to be alive, it was an incredible investment on the spiritual side, right? Spiritual mentors and guides helped me prepare for this. They put their time and effort in finding a wonderful family that would take this piece of work over here and deal with it. I had a wonderful family that spent a lot of time and effort that you can only appreciate when you have kids, right? There was all this investment done from a spiritual perspective, and I want to try to honor all of that and make the best of it that I can. Not that I think I will ever be 100% on it, but I want to make sure that I don't fall through the cracks. So COVID has been great in that perspective, Faten. I think that for me as well, like to think about it, right? And I think that what Leo was saying was really cool too, Leo, because I think that COVID will give us a different challenge that we're not thinking about. We are going to overcome the health issue, and we are going to be hit with an incredible financial and social issue. And that will be another wonderful test for us. How do we behave? Do we run back to the habits that we had before? Or do we start to rethink the way that we distribute our wealth and how we treat others and how we care for others? Like, it's going to give us like a lot of friction and a lot of, arguments and conversations about what to do with people who are struggling. But I hope that this will bring us together and make us, think that, we are our brother's keepers, right? We got to take care of each other. We got to find a way of reinventing things. If COVID and our world is breaking down right now, it's for good. We need to kind of rebuild it in a positive way that includes more people and makes all of us happy.
Definitely. And I think someone just in the chat, Barbara Motto, just said, thanks for bringing such knowledge. Definitely will have to watch this talk again to internalize many of the topics. Fantastic. And I think that, I just wanted to echo what Barbara's saying there, because I think that's the important thing, is to be able to take away from a talk and a presentation such as this, something that we can internalize for us to sit and reflect. Because, Dan, what you talked about when you were showing that little coin is so significant, because that is a reflection of a soul, a person, you, who is awake, or at least to a point is awake to say, okay, how am I evaluating my life? And so you're using it you're using the most easiest tool for you, which fits you, which I think is awesome. And I think others can also mimic that. They can utilize something, whether, some people carry gratitude rocks or something positive or anything that can remind them of, why am I here? What's my purpose? Whether it's, words of affirmation or just affirmations in general. I think what you brought just now is actually pretty monumentally important, because again, I always think about when Spiritism is like a beautiful painting. It's like the Mona Lisa, if you're just reading. But the Mona Lisa is, and the Louvre has all these gorgeous and amazing artwork, but it doesn't serve a purpose unless we're utilizing that beauty inside of ourselves on a day-to-day basis. So I think that you bringing your own personal example is actually very helpful for people to take it to their own personal selves, to their own selves, and say, okay, what do I need to do on a daily basis to reassess how this is affecting me, and how can I utilize this to change? How can I utilize COVID to be a better person? And I agree with you. Like, we can't go back to the way that we used to be, pre-COVID-19.
I don't want to.
Yeah, me either.
No?
Yeah. No, I think it's made a lot of people think and question, like, what do I want to do with my life? Like, what is my purpose here? Like, exactly what you said. I think that the questioning that you experience is majority of people are experiencing that. Maybe not majority, I think at least half, I'd like to think.
A good number at least, right?
Yeah, a good number, hopefully.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's the beauty of COVID, and it's the beauty of any pandemic, and the fact that, that it's so highlighted. Because let's be honest, if we're really being honest here, there are other pandemics that have been going on for a long time, on different scales, in different areas of life. But the fact that this is so highlighted, social media, it's affecting people's everyday jobs, this is why it's so life altering. Because we've had the pandemic of, people in starving countries not having basic things like water or basic human rights, or, the epidemic of, mental health issues. But because it wasn't affecting every single human being, it wasn't really shaking, I guess, enough, and it wasn't making that much of a ripple. But now this, as bad as it is in a sense, it's actually really good.
And there are amazing things going on, right? So we're not minimizing the pandemic. Let's be clear about this, right? It's painful, it's horrible, it hurts, right? People are losing their physical lives over this. So it's painful. We honor that. But there are beautiful things happening. There are people helping each other. Like, there is, I think, something crazy. I was talking to Sonia the other day in a Spiritist conversation, right? And she said that over 1,000 studies when we were there, remember that? Have been done on COVID since December. Like, the scientific community has, like, single-mindedly shifted to solving this problem. There's amazing things happening. People are stopping, manufacturing goods, manufacturing masks. That's incredible things happening. And so this is beautiful. And when we are done and we tackle this problem, because we will survive the coronavirus, right? We will tackle this. And when we do that, is it going to die? Or are we going to start to get that itch and say, you know what, we came together to solve this problem. What other great problem are we going to solve now? Right? What if we start using all this effort after we tackle coronavirus to tackle the next illness or homelessness or lack of adequate nutrition? Like, so I think that once we see the great accomplishments, I think some of us are going to be saying, you know what, we should be coming together to solve some of these challenges more often. And that, it's a gift from Corona. So I think that Corona, like this time, is a gift for us. But I think it's very Spiritist-like too, right? Because Spiritism, it's all about like fact-finding and reflection. There can be no like learning without reflection, right? We have to reflect on our experience. Having the experiences is not enough. We have to have the experience and reflect on it. So we even have a really famous, well-quoted question in the Spirits book that tells us that, St. Augustine comes and answers this thing of how do I progress? And he says, okay, do what I did, like every day, think about your day. So reflect, whether you're using a coin, whether you're using a book, whether you're using a bead, a rock, or nothing, a picture of your family. Just stop and think and reassess. And I think this is a wonderful time to do this. Oh, look at that. Another question from Paula here. Should we tackle that one too? Do we have time?
Yes, go ahead, please.
So, hi, Paula. Nice to see you, right? Because there's no little photo there on your icon. But, I hope to see you in the future again. When we encounter people with different belief systems, what are helpful conversations leads to learn about their thinking? I think it's a great thing. Like, how can we just go back to the basics? I jokingly say this, but I mean it. We all work for the same boss. We're just in different departments, right? So sometimes we get stuck on this departmental fight, right? Marketing wants more of a budget from the boss than communications, and sales want something else. But so let's go back to the beginning. Sometimes I wonder if we have this tendency to focus on what divides us rather than what unites us. Right? So if there is no point in talking to things that divide us, I mean, they're not going to lead to anything, right? You have to go back to what's familiar, establish familiar territory, talk about that, and then you can talk about things that are different. But if we start where we are different, I don't see how that brings us together. So I think this time is a great moment for that too, because we're all going back to the basics. We are no longer arguing about whether we should read this passage in our churches, or we should dress this way, or have a sermon on Sunday or Monday or Tuesday, or we're all going back to the importance of life and the belief in something greater, right? So we can start there. We can kind of go back to what's the core of it, right? Kardec was a wonderful educator, and he had some wonderful sentences when he talks about like Spiritism and Spirit. He says, before we can make somebody a Spiritist, we have to make them a spiritualist. What does that mean? Before we can talk about reincarnation, passes, life after life, right? We have to kind of figure out whether they believe in the spirit. If they do, then we can kind of proceed. But if they don't, what's the point talking about reincarnation? I mean, they don't believe in the spirit. They don't believe in God. So we got to go back to where people are, and then from there slowly progress forward. And when we're having these interfaith conversations, we should make sure that we go back to the basics. And that's great because it helps us also question our basics. Sometimes we have these things and we don't even know why they're there, and that also includes our religious thinking. Like we heard, like how many times, I'm going to give an example here, how many times I have seen a picture or a quote that somebody said, the famous Brazilian medium Chico Xavier said this, and I'm like, pretty sure he didn't say that, right? Because that quote makes no sense, right? But because people just accept the value of things because of the name on the bottom, we end up, passing on information that's not great. So go back to the core, to the basics. Go study to the beginning, right? Pick up that Spirits book again. The most exciting thing in the Spirits book, people tell me, I tell this to people, they think I'm nuts. And maybe I am nuts. But the most exciting piece of the Spirits book for me is the table of contents. Take the table of contents and ask yourself the question, why are things laid out this way? Why did Kardec decide to put things in this order? Right? There is a method to the madness. right? We've talked about this before. Like, we go with the basic facts, then we talk about the philosophy of it all and how the spiritual world works, then we talk about moral laws, and then we talk about cause and consequence. The Spirit's book is facts. The medium's book is the spiritual world. The gospel, according to Spiritism, is the moral laws, and heaven and hell is the cause and consequences, right? So he follows through on the method he proposes on the first book with the works that come behind. And and Genesis kind of loops everything back in again. So it's a really interesting process to see how and why did the spirits answer things this way, right? Something is really cool, right? Not because it's in the Spirit's book. It's in the Spirit's book because it's really cool, right? It's not because it's there because it's the truth. It's the truth, therefore it's there. So why? Ask yourself the annoying 5-year-old game of why, Daddy, why? Right? You want to drive somebody nuts, just tell them why. Like, ask 3 whys, right, in a row. But do that with yourself. So, and I think that's a fantastic way of like rethinking and going back to what Lel was saying, going back to what Fatin was saying, going back to what Paula was saying, what all were saying, like this is an opportunity for us to kind of rethink things. But to rethink, we have to have these tough questions and ask ourselves tough why questions and how do I know this? To have this scientific mindset before we can do like some philosophizing and before we can do some moral applications of it, right? We got to start with the facts and the basic things, and I think it's an important thing to do, and I think Spiritism does it really well, and that's why it's so exciting to celebrate the 18th of April for me, because it takes me back to the beginning and say, oh my goodness, 163 years ago, all this knowledge existed, right? What Kardec and the spirits did was, let me organize this for the people who are a little bit slow here in the uptake, right? Let me get you the cliff notes of stuff. But instead of giving you all the content, I'm going to give you how you can learn. Like, here are some study skills. Here are some study habits that you benefit from, and it can be helpful so that you can do this learning on your own. So go kid, figure things out, right? And I think that this is a beautiful thing that Spiritism is offering us every single day, and that we haven't yet fully come to terms with, because we haven't had the time to reflect on these things, but maybe now we do.
Thank you, Daniel. I would like to, before we close, just to say one thing that you brought to us at the beginning, and I think you're exercising and you're a living proof of what we said at the beginning, which we have made progress. To be here with you today, listening to this amazing talk, this material that you're bringing to us, it is the proof that we are evolving. And thank you so much for your time. Thank your family for us as well, because as you said to I believe Alba, you could be doing many other things, but you chose and you gave us the capability to be with you and learn from you. Also, something that you said at the beginning, I take notes that you hope to continue this conversation with us. So I'm quite sure that Daniel Santos, our Daniel here from Maryland, will be talking to you about giving continuation to this talk. Especially now that we have this amazing technology organized. And what I'd like to do, so you guys don't get tired of this ugly voice, I'll invite Kirsten, ask Kirsten to say the final prayer for us and close this evening. And remember, folks, everyone out there, not only following us here, and if you watch this in the future, that when we have these moments, it's for us to learn, it's for us to bring this, truly exercise this in our homes, that is our hearts, but our physical homes as well. So as she prays and she gives thanks for what we have seen and we have shared tonight, make sure that you truly exercise and feel it, as Daniel said. Make sure that we think about it, really bring to our senses, so that we can multiply this amazing work that we were doing. So thank you again, Daniel. I'll pass the word to Kirsten, and thank everyone for watching and sharing this moment with us.
Thank you, guys. I just want to say thank you. It's really fantastic to be here with you, and what a wonderful thing Spiritism is, right? Kudos to Spiritism, who really gives us the tools to ask these really tough questions. Thank you also for having me, and I hope to continue the conversation. Come hang out with me on Facebook or where have you, and we'll cross paths, and I hope to see you guys soon. So thank you again. I'm the one who benefits the most, no doubt. And I'm so glad my 5-year-old didn't burst into here a couple of times. So we're all making progress. We're all making progress all the time.
Thank you so much, Daniel. And for those who may not already know, you have this great show called Spiritist Conversations. Who doesn't know about it? You're on Facebook. You're everywhere. You're on YouTube. People can find you. Can you just share that real quick? And for those that are watching?
Thanks. Yeah, I don't think everybody can find me. I mean, I don't have a lot of things out there, but I try. I'm trying to grow. So you can find me on Facebook. Just look for Dan Assisi. So it's Facebook/Dan Assisi. YouTube, I think it's the same thing. I am so excited because I broke the 100 people mark on YouTube, which means I'm no longer XYZX530. I can actually have a name. Like, oh, I have a name now. Right? I can choose a URL. But yeah, whatever, Instagram, just search for Dan Assisi. I love to learn from you guys, to stay connected, keep the conversations alive, and obviously Spiritist Conversations, of which Kirsten has been a part, and she doesn't know it yet, but she's going to have to come back. And that's also on Facebook and YouTube/Spiritist Conversations on Facebook. YouTube, I don't think we have 100 people yet, so I don't think we have a name. Just search for Spiritist Conversations, but follow that work, and we would love to hear from you guys. And thank you guys for the Spiritist Society of Baltimore, and please take my virtual hug at a distance, and how awesome it is that we can be at a distance but together. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. Yeah, and I will say just an added thing here that there are a lot of great posts you make. I think they're originals. Just you share a lot of positive quotes. So, nowadays when there's so many different accounts we can follow on the gram and on Facebook, yours is one that's definitely positive, and you're definitely adding to the world. So I think it's something great, and I think that more of us should do that, utilizing our social media to be a force of change and positivity. So thank you, Dan. So let's switch over to our prayer for this evening. So for those of you who are watching, if you wish, you can close your eyes if that is conducive for a meditative state for you. Or if you wish to leave your eyes open and just as well as listen, you can do that, whatever is most comfortable for you. But we find that closing our eyes is much more conducive, and it facilitates us really focusing on this moment of elevating our hearts, elevating our minds to this higher energy, to this divine creator, to our mentors, our guides, and a deep sense of gratitude for one another, for this technology, for our brother Dan Assisi in California, and for all the like-minded souls who've allowed this evening to take place. We thank our dear Creator for this opportunity to live this life with all its struggles. But we'd like to take this opportunity to especially ask for those who are suffering, especially those who are not highlighted on the news or social media, for those in the hospitals or mental institutions that are suffering a great deal of emotional distress and disturbance. We pray for all of humanity, especially those that are marginalized and forgotten about, and don't have the same means and resources as everybody else. We pray for those in our families, those in our neighborhoods, those in our government, that positive change may occur. And we ask and remind ourselves the talks such as these, to internalize them and to be our own force for change, to utilize our free will to do good for others. We ask you, dear Lord, for your continued strength and courage, patience and resignation through all our challenging times. And may we practice solidarity, if nothing else, to remember and be reminded that we are not alone. We thank you, and so be it. Thank you, everyone, for participating and for being here. And for those of you in the chat, for those of you who may be watching this later on, thank you so much. Don't forget to check out Daniel Assisi on his Facebook, Instagram, and as well as Spiritist Conversations. There's great Spiritist content there. You will not regret it, I guarantee you. So thank you, everyone. Have a blessed Saturday evening, and God bless everybody.
Be well.
Bye. See you, Dan.
Cheers.